You're listening to Rebel Spirituality with me, Sam Goldfinch. Here's the truth. Wisdom doesn't follow rules. So each week we're going to explore what it means to wake up your way so you can live a more peaceful, creative and inspired life no matter your circumstances. It's time to blaze your unique path to truth. Hey friends, I'm really excited. We have a Spiritual Rebel interview this week, and it's been a while. I have my friend Boh Guerra on the show, and me and Boh have got to know each other recently and just had such lovely conversations that I really wanted to get Boh on the show. We're really aligned in how we see things, in how we point the recognition that we'd love people to have. And you know, Boh's really passionate in helping people to just see who they really are, for us all to know the oneness. That to see through the illusion of separation and to see through the illusion of the deficient self that we've often spent much of our life believing that we are. And so it was a really lovely conversation. You know, we talk about that. We talk about Boh's journey from a militant atheist, as he puts it, to where he is now. We talk about full circle spirituality, you know, living life with a lot of heart, not denying this relative human experience, but also knowing the absolute truth of ourselves, and of course seeing the unity of those two things. They are of course not separate. So it was a really lovely conversation, and I'm really excited to put it out into the world. And Boh has a website called Remembering Home, and I just love the name of that, to remember the truth of us, or to know who we are, you know, to come home. And I just really that really resonates with me. I love that. So yeah, that's it. I'll hand you over to me and Boh. It was a really lovely conversation, and I really can't wait to get this out into the world. I'll see you in a sec. Right, I've been really excited about this. I've been all over the Christmas period. I've been reflecting and looking forward to this conversation, Boh. So it's really lovely to have you here, man.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, it's lovely to be with you.
Yeah. So I have Boh Guerra with me, and we only met the other day, right? Really, man. This is kind of the second conversation that we've had. We met through a mutual friend, and yeah, we were talking about spirituality, recovery, non-duality, and we just decided it would be really nice to get together and record a conversation. So here we are doing that. But before we hop in, is there anything in particular that you'd love people to know about you? Or people don't need to know so much, but if there's anything in particular you want to share, then you're very welcome to.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Boh. I'm from the US. I live in Pennsylvania. And I professionally I work as an interspiritual counselor. I work with people exploring spirituality, how that can impact well-being. With some clients, I investigate non-duality specifically, in exploring experience and kind of unraveling the false ideas we have about ourselves, and kind of getting to the heart of our inherent wholeness. Is that I use that phrasing, and I've enjoyed hearing you say the same. It really is all about that. I've in my own experience, I've been particularly inspired by that discovery of, at the heart of our being, at the heart of our nature, is this inherent wholeness that is always available. And it's something that that discovery can be very helpful with regard to addiction recovery. It's something very near and dear to my heart, in my own experience. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. And there's something about that phrase. It's it's wonderful. And I love that. I know that whoever I'm working with, they can't mess this one up. There's not a single being that isn't inherently whole. And so I love seeing people wake up to that and have that recognition. And I don't know if you see it this way, but to me, pretty much at the root of all addiction, I would say, is the feeling or the belief that we're separate in some way. So I think it's not only is it very life-giving, it's a ruthlessly practical insight, I sometimes call it. You know, it really has huge implications for our life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we can get more into that later on, but that's certainly the most I guess nourishing invitation that I've received within this unfolding of recovery is recognizing that um actually what has been perpetuating this conditioned tendency of addiction and seeking this you know desire to self-soothe and to escape the present moment and to avoid discomfort, uh, to try to fix and resolve this sense of lack, the sense of deficiency, is primarily based on a misperception, a
Yeah.
misunderstanding of what's actually here and what we are. So yeah,
Yeah.
very compelling, but also very, um, I guess, surprising or
Yeah.
unexpected.
Yeah. It's funny to how many decades it's possible to live and not know something. And then once it's
Mhm.
known, it just becomes so beautifully kind of ordinary and obvious and simple. It's not
Mhm.
transcendental and mystical. Like for me, I don't know how it was for you, Bo, but I think after drugs and in fact, during my years where I was very heavily involved, shall we say, in a career of drugs and alcohol, I was also addicted to spirituality in all different forms and addicted to kind of the path in air quotes. And I need to complete myself. I need to kind of fill this hole in my soul. All these, I really felt like I was kind of searching to do that. And yeah, to me the core of rebel spirituality is saying no, that's not the case. The case is you're whole now, you're not missing a single thing. And yeah, I think that's very different to a lot of the messages that are out there in some spiritual circles, and I have been in a number of places where the message is it's going to take you a very, very long time, lifetimes potentially, many of them, in order to get where you are looking to go. And that seeking, perpetuates and I have felt the relief of being able to just see the illusion of that kind of fall away.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, I really resonate with what you're sharing, man. So I mean, so I think I said to you before we got together, right, when I used to ask this question of like, what does spirituality mean to you? Because for me, I've always wanted to kind of point in a different direction to the forms of spirituality, the
Mhm.
incense and the practices and the this and the that. And I'm also aware that in the UK versus the US, spirituality has a very different connotation for a lot of people, and it
Mhm.
carries different kind of meaning and form with it. It's always going to be different for people. But it's always struck me as something that points to the formless dimension or source, and this one being that animates all things. And that's where I'm pointing, with that. But I'd love to ask you the question, as you sit here today with me, like what does the word spirituality point to for you at this point?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say that just in a general sense, um, within the US, there's a lot of nuance in how that's
Mm.
interpreted and framed. And of course, what spirituality means to me is going to be very different to my neighbor or, probably the majority of the population, who knows. But um, for myself, spirituality is spirituality is this is about what's most essential about the human experience.
Mm.
Um, the spiritual paths, religions, all those human created forms and structures,
Yeah.
at best can serve as um, tools, kind of guide rails toward this, which is inherently uh, beyond and more primary to any kind of form or concept. But ultimately, spirituality is this, I guess, investigation, exploration of our inherent wholeness, of
Mm.
truth that isn't uh, defined or owned by any sort of path or um, cultural identity structure, anything like that. It's spirituality. Authentic spirituality is this, the heart of any kind of tradition, or even I would say in some cases, the heart of even non-spiritual uh, structures, like the heart of um, modern medicine, science,
Mm.
the heart of um, psychology, the heart of art, the heart of every dimension of human experience points to this, sometimes more overtly, sometimes a bit more subtly, but it's spirituality is this fundamental aspect of our nature. Um, and of course, there are a lot of different ideas of what that can mean, and a lot of different ideas of how to discover that, how to uncover that, how to integrate that, to explore and celebrate that. But
Yeah.
the I would say the commonalities and where they point to are far more important than the different ways that we can talk about it. So
Yeah.
um, it's to put succinctly, um, spirituality is the invitation of what you are is far more than what you've been led to believe. And then, you know, there's a whole wealth of exploration from that initial
Yeah.
invitation. But
I love that. I love that, man. We're pretty aligned in how we see that. And I love when you were talking about the well, what I heard and what you were saying, I don't want to put words to it, but one thing I've often said, there's a podcast, I think, to this name that I recorded saying, everything is spiritual. If we're like this one movement, this unfolding, this radiant moment, this, I heard you say, that which is most essential, this, and just this, as they often refer to it
Mhm.
in some Buddhist practices. And I just, we have these ideas, I think, in culture of spiritual shit and not spiritual shit. And in the spiritual stuff category, it's, well, we put churches and incense and being nice and this stuff in that category. And on the other side, the not spiritual stuff is anger and, all that stuff that's not allowed, and this, what we're pointing to, or what I feel you're pointing to, and what I myself like to point to as well, is this deeper, um, the fundamental source of everything. So
Mhm.
at which point all of those dynamics of good, bad, spiritual, not spiritual, up, down, left, right, just collapse in the face of that. And it's just this expression, this oneness of which, of course, we all are and all a part of. So yeah, I loved it. I loved what you were sharing there, dude. Like when you said the invitation, I love that. When do you think you first felt that invitation moving through you?
Mhm. Mhm. So in truth, all my life,
Mm,
um, I can say that when I first touched into something, more real than, I guess, the interpretation of life that I had been seeing through,
mhm,
um, was actually through like music, hearing music for the first time, or for the first like visceral time. when I was very young.
Mm.
Um, it was actually within a East Orthodox church. I had no idea what they were talking about. It must have gone with um, my dad and uh, kind of didn't understand whatever sermon was going on or whatever it was. I just, I was a kid, not interested, didn't hadn't bought into it either. So just sitting on the steps um, at the downstairs of the uh, choir platform and just like hearing the choir sing.
Mm.
Um, there was something about like where the music was coming from, where the singing was coming from. This kind of um, felt resonance that kind of their passion um, was coming from that touched me in a way that I uh, hadn't experienced before. But then, of course, uh, there was well, like 15 years or something of completely forgetting that.
Yeah.
But that was kind of like the first touching in, and then but many, many invitations throughout life. I feel like every experience really is an invitation.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, so whether it's positive, enjoyable, or enormously distressing, it's always an invitation of what's true, what's more primary, am I, what assumptions am I holding about myself and my experience? Um, that life is kind of inviting this, the letting go of that position, those beliefs. Um, so for me, that largely unfolded as um, different, I guess, mental health and addiction related experiences.
mm,
Um, so my first kind of deep dive into spirituality, um, into exploring this aspect of ourself that is more primary, that is more essential than all the ideas we have, um, was through the context of addiction. So
mm.
prior addiction recovery specifically. So prior to getting sober, um, I was militantly atheist, very, very against the concept of a higher power, let alone any kind of religious structure, which is funny because I would argue at this point that atheism is still a structure about non-belief.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
So, but of course, when you're in that headspace, it's very difficult to, see the kind of irony of where you're speaking from. Um, but so when I got sober and got involved in, spiritual programming, recovery programming, I explored the spirituality out of necessity because, I knew that what I had been, the solutions that I had been playing with over the course of active addiction uh, weren't helping. Um, and if I continued to try to have things go my way, it was going to, lead to death.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because uh,
No.
that's that's where kind of where I was. So this time around, I got sober in 2018, and it started from waking up at a treatment center on the back end of a failed suicide attempt. So it was very clear to me, very, very clear to me that one, uh, if I continued to orient to life in the way that I had been,
Hmm.
it would lead to the same place
Yeah.
or worse.
Hmm.
And that I had been given an opportunity to try again, um, that it wasn't my time. And so I, through gritted teeth, as they say. I started to um, tried to see what these recovery resources were about, what spirituality was about. And because I had no context for it really prior to then, I had explored it through, well, what are all these I guess ways of connecting to a higher power or exploring our nature or whatever it is. Um, what are the commonalities within all these traditions? And discovering that there were actually traditions within traditions that um, were all about experience, direct
Mm.
experience,
Yeah.
was very compelling to me because, you know, the basis on the my atheism before then was on, there's no experience, there's no proof, there's
Yeah.
no whatever. Um, and so the fact that there was this wealth of knowledge to the contrary was very interesting. So through that, I just explored different traditions like Buddhism, Taoism, Advaita Vedanta,
Yeah.
um, really all sorts of stuff. I went on a full on kind of academic exploration, and through that exploration, I started having experiences that I had absolutely no way of explaining.
Mm.
But fortunately, these texts, these teachings from different mystics over history, um, they seem to understand what was going on. They seem to have familiarity with these kinds of experiences and different explanations for what they were pointing to, and why they were happening. Um, and so, yeah, I would say um, my first genuine experience of not only spirituality, but what the point of it was was through these kind of experiential um, direct pointings through these mystic teachings.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it is really, I found that myself as well. That for, so when I think I was 18, I read The Power Now. And that prior to that, like much like yourself, when I was much younger, I'd had some pretty funky experiences when I was kind of like 5, 6, 7. And music also touched me very deeply. I kind of really, that particular portal, I was really struck by that when you were sharing. I love that. And then I kind of had to laugh when you said it kind of, lost it for however many years. Me too, and I very quickly fell into a very a very wonky relationship with alcohol and many other drugs, to put it lightly. And yeah, I the spiritual exploration for me, I think I really felt some deep recognition even when I was 17 or 18, but I honestly still thought that I was lacking something, or that I was not enough, or that I was missing something. So that seeking was so strong that even though I'd had a real profound, wow, there's much more to me than just my thinking, for example, like there's way more going on here. Um, but actually, moving through all these different texts and gaining an intellectual understanding and collecting shiny spiritual objects, as I've sometimes called it, for the
mhm.
best part of for a decade, which are great, but they don't do shit when you're in the middle of something, and they're the first things to disappear,
Mhm.
when you're kind of really in the middle of an emotional storm or whatever. And then to stumble into Advaita Vedanta, non-duality, Dzogchen, these kinds of understandings, which are really, yeah, as you say, they're not asking anyone to take anything on faith. There's nothing there about belief. It's direct experience. Let's inquire, let's find out, let's see what's what,
Mhm.
and let's make it doubtless to the point where it's doubtless.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I really resonate with that as well, and I think I've met a lot of people, and I think there may be people listening to this podcast who are hand on heart a little bit, well, for sure, sick of the seeking. They're at a point where they're tired, they're tired of that, and they're looking to kind of be able to give that up and to feel that relief. And I hear that a lot, and that's it's something that I'm kind of very kind of passionate in, just for those who feel like they hear the call for that, to point in that direction for people. And I kind of feel that is true for you as well, Bo. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There's um there's some lovely context and discovery that we can have through the more uh like gradual
Mm,
linear representations of exploring our nature and spirituality. Um, that being said, a lot of what is either intentionally overlooked or just um, based on how they're expressed and presented, just left out, is this um, very important fact, which is that it's always here right now.
yeah,
What we're looking for is always right here, right now, within every experience, no matter how it's appearing.
yeah,
And no amount of practices, um, no amount of working through, white knuckling all these different aspects of the hero's journey is
mm,
going to get us closer to that. Some aspects of that mode of exploration can help refine the clarity, right, of that, but it doesn't mean that I have to have a certain experience in order to get there. It doesn't mean that I need to do X, Y, and Z in order to arrive.
yeah,
The really what I found to be the most helpful within my own experience and what I explore a lot with clients is the idea, this assumption that we're starting with, that it's not already here,
hmm,
that I'm not already full and complete, that there is some point to get to, some point to arrive at, some point in the future that is truer than this very experience.
yeah,
Um, it really I have a very I feel very passionate about the kind of unknowing process of our assumptions and beliefs and points of resistance, challenging directly what we're assuming about ourselves right now, what we're assuming about our experience right now.
yeah,
Because even though that can be uncomfortable and disorienting when we start, the fruits of that, of being willing to look directly to what's here, what's true about myself right now, the actual experience of myself right now, is is worth it. Um, it doesn't take several months or years to recognize what's true right now, because it's not about time. It's not about a process,
yeah,
and that's very freeing. Um, so yeah, the best way to stop seeking is to look into who is it that we're taking to be the seeker, and what assumptions and beliefs that seeking seems to be driven by, and
yeah,
if they're actually true, if they hold up.
yeah. Like, I think for so many people, they believe that something needs to happen, or there needs to be some form of experience, or some form of experience that is lasting in order for. And some of the things that we're talking about here, some traditions are kind of sacrilege in one way, because it's, how dare you say something like that? Like it's lifetimes of work. It's not here
Mhm.
now. So I kind of, yeah. Well, hey, so I was going to ask you, and given what you've just shared, Bo, and I just love the feeling that we're in, man. It's so lovely to hear you share from that space. I was going to ask, what is something that you would love those listening to know? And feel free to approach, not that you wouldn't, but feel free to approach that in whatever way you like, whether you feel like it's, you want to point people towards something that they are assuming, or whether you just want to kind of share from your heart around what it is that you'd love them to know. Like I would, I just love to see like what comes up for you in there. Like
Mhm.
what would you love our listeners to know, not at an intellectual level, but to really know?
Mhm. So I'll give a little bit of context
Mm,
first. So the more I got involved in conventional recovery programming, um, and spirituality and just all this stuff, the um, process of getting my life back on track and um, cultivating a sense of stability and well-being. The more I started to recognize that um, sorry, my dog just
that's okay. I was going to say, have we got like as a friend come along? We like,
yeah,
this
my
is the first time, man. I love a dog coming to say hey.
mhm. He was shaking himself off, and there's this like chime that I have connected to the desk, so he just then he got scared. So
It's all good.
anyway, um, so what I started to notice um, is that, so for example, within 12-step recovery, the premise is that you know we are kind of caught in this cycle of addiction because of this spiritual malady, this God-sized hole
Mm,
that we're seeking to fill, and that the solution for that is to um, be of service to others and to explore the various self-oriented ways um, that we kind of perpetuate this sense of dis-ease, which is beautiful. It's wonderful, very effective. However, a lot of how conventional recovery functions is still from this belief in deficiency.
mhm,
So it's starting from this place of, you know, I, I have personality defects, and
yeah.
um, I need to improve myself so that I'm not, you know, a shitty person. And which, like, if that I'm not saying that people shouldn't work on themselves in that regard. I think the the intention of being a more compassionate presence in the world is certainly worthwhile and deserves attention.
Yeah.
Um, but if we are trying to resolve this sense of deficiency from a sense of deficiency, from identifying fully with that place of I'm not good enough, um, of there's something wrong with me, from this shame cycle, guilt and shame cycle that so many in active addiction and recovery experience,
Yeah.
um, that still perpetuate unhealthy patterns of behavior. A lot of people in recovery, even if um, they've found relief from the addictive cycle of drinking and using, they may develop a pattern of codependency or sex addiction
Mm.
or um, food addiction, sweets. Like this is a lot of stuff that just comes up um, uh, in work with clients, that there are these kind of other patterns of self-soothing and escape that tend to develop.
Yeah. I see that a lot too.
So what I would like um, to invite listeners to consider is that the solution isn't that we haven't found that thing outside of ourselves yet that will then, stop the cycle of either seeking a better experience, seeking the resolution of this sense of deficiency. That will never happen. Um, there's nothing that we will ever find outside of ourselves that could ever resolve this sense of deficiency, especially if we are viewing and living from that sense of deficiency. So, the most important thing that I found within my own recovery process, and that I kind of continue to see validated in the work that I do, is this exploration of, is it true that I am this sense of deficiency? Is it really true that I'm not good enough? Is it really true that I'm this limited fragment of experience in the head that is separate from life, that needs to control and manage life in order to feel okay, in order to feel at peace? Maybe the issue isn't that we haven't found that one experience yet, or that resource outside of ourself, um, that will finally do it for us,
Mm.
will finally put us at ease. Maybe the solution is to look closer at what we're believing about who we are, what we are. Um, to inquire into, well, is it true that a thought could hear these words? Is it true that a thought could experience? If there is a thought arising, could that thought be what's aware of that thought? Does that really make any sense?
Mm.
In the same way of, there's this microphone that I'm aware of. Could the microphone be what's aware of the microphone? That doesn't make any sense. And yet we do that all the time with
Mm.
this sense of self, with this mental projection of patterns, memories, identities, beliefs. The most rewarding exploration that I've endeavored upon in my recovery has been to challenge this fundamental belief that what I'm trying to seek relief from, that actually has anything to do with me, that actually is what I am. Through drinking and drugging and codependency and eating disorders and you know uh, self-soothing through sweets and all this stuff, I've done it all,
Yeah, me
and
too.
it's all been to get relief from this
Yeah.
voice in my head, right? This antagonistic, uh, deficiency based, fear based, judgment based sense of a deficient me.
Yeah.
But all of that was part of what was so distressing about that, is identifying with that to begin with. Um, so there's a whole mode of exploration that could lead to, but that is just the kind of initial invitation that I'll leave for
Mm.
people to hear, is that the solution is in looking closer at what you believe yourself to be, and to investigate what is it that's looking closer at that.
I
Because
love
also, yeah, also just, you know, it can't be a deficient self. That's that's what I'll just put put
no,
there, is then
it's beautiful,
the
man. Like I love that. I love that we, in our own ways, are both kind of looking in that direction or pointing in that way, because when it's a deficient self that needs fixing and polishing, and I mean that's freaking never ending. So this this self that we're improving, and then to see with the invitation to realize that the whole house of cards can collapse is a really, it's very life giving. It's a beautiful thing to see, and I love how you, I love the feeling of that, man. It's a privilege to be able to be here and share in that moment with you. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure that would have hit home for a lot of people for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. I'm sure that we'll have more conversations where we can go deeper into, because you're right, because this kind of the implications of this, and the implications that are the thing I love so much about this recognition and this exploration is that it's not like it's not effort based in the way that so many things are. It doesn't require us to wake up at 5 a.m. and jump through 75 million self-help hoops, you know, and and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and it's been a real relief for me as well, as someone who also has been through eating disorders, and different, poly drug use, and many different things. Like yeah, I think it's really helpful for people to hear, and men as well, actually talk about this too, because I think I think there's not that many guys that are sort of talking about this as well, which I think is important. So
Mhm.
yeah. So that element as well, I'm grateful. So, oh man, it's really lovely. Like I'm aware of the time we've been talking for nearly an hour, right? So maybe this would be a really lovely place for us to kind of pause, and I have no doubt that we'll get back together and have more conversations and kind of explore things more. But what would you like if people would like to come and find you, or like would you like to point people towards a website, or what's just share whatever makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So if people want to just either get in contact or learn more about my work, you're welcome to check out my website. It's rememberinghome.net.
Mm. Mm.
And yeah, there's if you want to explore services, there's the opportunity to do that there. But you can also just send me a message and say,
Yes.
hey, ask questions. I'm always at my computer, so happy to chat and say hi with anyone who's interested.
I love the name, man. Remembering
Thanks.
home. Yeah, it's beautiful because
Yeah,
that's it, right? You're home. And
yeah. You've never left.
yeah.
It's the remembering, right? It's that's based in a Nisargadatta quote I have here.
Mm.
Whoop, dropping everything. Having never left the house, you are looking for the way home. And that is that is the process of seeking and active addiction and all of it. Every moment of suffering that we encounter as humans is beautifully captured within that statement. And um, so it's this the fact that what we're looking for is closer to us than we are to ourselves.
Less than a millimeter away. Yeah.
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 Um, is so empowering and really has just been the most nourishing discovery I've encountered. So
Mm. Well, thanks, man. Like honestly, like thank you so much for coming in and just having a chat. I feel like we've just had a metaphorical cup of cocoa and just sat here and just had a really lovely chat together and got to know each other, as well as kind of hopefully put together a conversation that will have perhaps expanded things for people in a way. And yeah, I look forward to the next time.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam.
You're so welcome, man.